Welcome to the Practical Tips channel. I'm Matt, your host, providing practical tips to make your life better. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more tips. This is actually Color Codes Part 1. There's two different types of color codes that your car uses to tell you things. That's right, your car is trying to tell you something about its condition. Something like a patient trying to tell their doctor what is wrong. So the first set of color codes has to do with the exhaust color, coming from your car. So there's mainly three categories of color codes for your car's exhaust, and they tell you important things about the condition of your car and what's going on, particularly in the engine. Your first color code is white exhaust. This looks a lot like steam. And we're talking about a lot of steam. You may see somebody's car idling at a red traffic signal. They're stopped at a stoplight, and you see some water running out the exhaust. That probably means their catalytic converter is actually working pretty well. That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about clouds of white steam-looking exhaust coming out of your tailpipe. Let me tell you what that means. Coolant somehow is getting into the cylinder of the engine where the combustion takes place, and it's coming out through the exhaust system. This is not good. Coolant is not supposed to get into the cylinders. It means one of three possible problems. One, you could have a bad head gasket. The gasket, of course, on the cylinder head is the seal that seals off the outside and also the cylinder with the valves and everything. Most cars these days have overhead valves, so the valves are up above the pistons and everything. So when you have that happen, if the seal, that gasket is bad, then it will leak, and it can not only leak air into and out of the cylinder head and the engine, it can also leak coolant out of the cylinder head into the actual cylinders. That's not good. You're going to use up the coolant, and instead of the coolant circulating like it's normally supposed to and cooling the engine, you may run out of coolant, and then the engine overheats and you have a really serious problem. The second possible problem is a cracked cylinder head. If you have a crack in the actual head, even if the gasket is okay, if there's somehow a crack, sometimes it's a manufacturing flaw that happens in the cylinder head, then coolant can leak from one of the built-in channels in the cylinder head, and it can leak through that crack and get into the cylinder that way. So that's a bit more serious problem, and that's going to be more expensive to fix than the bad head gasket as a rule of thumb. You probably have to replace the entire cylinder head, because that's not something where you can't just take the head off, weld that cracked spot, and hope that it's all going to be okay. There's probably a problem in the metal itself, and so that cylinder head would have to be replaced. The worst of the three problems you could have would be what we call a cracked block. In other words, the engine block itself has a crack in it, similar to what we just described with the cylinder head, only in this case, because it's in the block, it is really serious. And you're talking about not leaking coolant into the cylinders, you're talking about mixing oil with coolant with engine oil. It's just going to get ugly. That means it's either time for a new engine, or because that's really expensive, it might be time for a different car. You might need to get a new car with that one. So when you see lots of this white steam-looking exhaust coming out of your car, get to a shop right away. Get it checked. Get your mechanic on that problem right away so that you can determine what the issue is and how expensive it's going to be to fix, or whether it's really even worth fixing at all. Now, the next color code for your exhaust is a blue or kind of a bluish gray color. What this normally means is that unburned gasoline is coming out through the exhaust. So somehow gasoline is going through the process, but the fuel air mixture is so rich, that is, it has so much fuel that some of it is not getting completely burned, and it's coming out through the exhaust. Well, of course, on the way out to that tailpipe, it goes through some other things like the catalytic converter and the muffler. So unburned gasoline is not what your catalytic converter is designed for. So if this continues very long, it'll ruin the catalytic converter. And as those people who've had some of those folks who've been victimized by having them stolen in recent months have heard, a catalytic converter is very expensive to replace. So you don't want to have that particular problem. So if the mixture is too rich, there's something really going on, and you really want to get that investigated, because cars these days, the computer controls that air-fuel mixture. So it shouldn't get out of whack. It shouldn't be getting out of balance. If it is, there may be some deeper problem that's going on, possibly due to the computer or a bad sensor or something somewhere. So again, an expert at your shop, your mechanic, should get that checked, fix that, and determine what's really going on. The next color code that shows you a problem with your car is black exhaust, and this is only for a gasoline engine car. A lot of times diesel exhaust tends to be very black, and so that's somewhat more normal, but that's a whole subject for a completely different video. So black exhaust from a gasoline-fueled car means that oil is being burned in the cylinder. This is not good, because this isn't supposed to happen either. So somehow you're getting oil into the cylinders. What problem does this indicate? Well, there's a couple of things. One, if the car has really high mileage, it could be that the piston rings are worn out. Okay, each piston has rings that help seal the piston against the cylinder wall, yet still allow the piston to slide up and down and do its job. Now, one of these rings is the oil ring, and if somehow it's getting too much oil, or something is, somehow it's picking up too much oil when it's down near the bottom of the cylinder, which is usually where it picks up the oil. It's supposed to lubricate the side of the piston so it does slide smoothly in the cylinder. But if something is not working right with this process, then you're going to get oil into the actual cylinder during combustion, and that's a problem. That's not supposed to happen. You can also have this being caused by a situation where the oil is not being changed frequently enough, oil level drops too low, and oil starts ending up where it doesn't belong. This, of course, can also do, as we said with the previous gray-blue color, and that is contaminate the catalytic converter, so that's not good. This problem also needs to be addressed right away. Now, there is one more variation on this problem, and that is, if you see this happen, and say you've got a car and you're stopped at a traffic light, and it's red, and the traffic light turns green, and so you accelerate away from the stop. If you see just kind of a brief puff or burst of this black smoke that happens only for a few seconds as you accelerate away from a stop like that, and then it seems to go away, what that often indicates is bad valve stem seals. The valves that allow the fuel-air mixture into the cylinder, of course, they basically have a round disc on the end, but they have a long shaft, probably 4 to 6 inches long, depending on the size of your engine. And so this shaft or stem has a seal in there. The valve, like all the other moving parts in the engine, needs oil. It has to be lubricated. And there's a stem seal in there that allows the oil to lubricate the valve stem without allowing the oil into the cylinder, because of course the valve opens into the cylinder. So if those valve stem seals are worn out, and again, this is probably a fairly high mileage engine we're talking about, if those valve stem seals are worn out, then you're going to get that brief black smoke that comes out the exhaust. It'll last for just a few seconds, and then once the car gets going down the road, it seems to be doing okay. Well, that's bad valve stem seals. Now, you can probably get those replaced. The cost may or may not be worth it, depending on exactly how old the car is and how many miles are on it, and maybe also whether or not it's paid for. So you want to give those factors some consideration, but at least take the car in that condition, at least take it to a shop and get it properly checked and evaluated so you do know what you're dealing with, rather than just taking a guess and saying, well, maybe it's time to just trade this car in and get something else. Don't just make assumptions. Be sure to take it to your shop and let your mechanic evaluate it properly so that you know what you're really having to deal with. You do want to, of course, check on these things if for no other reason than the simple fact that if you're using up engine oil, then at some point it gets too low and the engine won't run. A lot of the modern cars today with their computers, they have the computers tied in to an oil pressure sensor, and if it's too low, the computer will refuse to start the car, and nothing you can do will get the computer to start it. So at that point, if your engine oil is that low, you better get that thing towed to a shop if you expect to drive the car again. I've seen this type of thing happen. It's not pretty. Also, as a final note, I want to remind everybody, change your oil at the recommended maintenance intervals at least. I heard of a case once where a parent and their teenage kid were both driving the same car. They were taking turns with this car as they drove it, and it was a fairly late model car, an import, normally a good quality car. but they took it into the shop for a warranty issue, which the technician worked on and got it resolved. And the technician told them, hey, you probably want to get the oil changed on this thing as soon as you can. It's looking like it, really needs an oil change. Well, they kind of ignored a little bit what he said. They was like, well, we don't want to deal with that right now. We're just here to take care of this one problem. And I don't know, they maybe didn't have the cash to spare to take care of that oil change right then. But in any event, they didn't get the oil change right then, and they drove the car for a little while longer, and then it quit. The car wouldn't start, and it turned out they had run it out of oil. The engine was basically seized up, and it was not going to start. And car warranties have changed, so the warranty from the manufacturer, they can tell if you have done something where you've either kind of abused the car or if you haven't complied with the warranty by getting the maintenance done. So you have to maintain the warranty by doing the proper maintenance at the proper times or mileage for the car. Well, they hadn't done that, of course. New engine for their car was about $5,000. And I can get a decent deal on a relatively good used car for around $5,000. So, yeah, do you want to buy a new engine? Probably not, especially not without the help of your warranty. So, do really recommend take care of the maintenance. And when you see these different colors, white, like steam, blue-gray, or black, when you see a lot of that coming out of your car's exhaust, get it to the shop right away, get it checked, and don't leave until you've got a really solid reason for what's going on and a really good estimate on what it's going to take to fix it. Thanks for watching another Practical Tips video. For more practical tips, be sure to click the like button and subscribe.